Hello, everyone. This is David, Fairly Secret Music. Um, My Dying Bride just came out with a new album called Ghost of Orion, and I posted on one of the Facebook groups, and it got a fairly good response. And unfortunately, um, my initial reaction for their new album isn't the best. I was hoping for a bit more. But I decided to do this video because I wanted to go through the history of My Dying Bride for some people who might not know, and to um, just kind of reinforce how good I do think they are and how important I think they are for this genre in particular, also. So we will start with As the Flower Withers. This uh, is one of my least listened to albums by them, just because I got into them around 95 when they had just released Angel in the Dark River, their third album. And at that time, I wasn't a huge fan of a lot of the death metal vocals. I didn't mind the death metal vocals, but I was more into the melodic singing. So this has had probably some of the least listens, but when I was delivering mail over this year, I ended up listening to parts of it quite a bit. If you're wondering why I have these post-it notes on there, it's because um, I just didn't want to go to the trouble of doing this whole video and then getting it pulled down uh, because of some censorship and stuff. So at this point, they were uh, more in line with the doom death kind of style, and this is well, they had the violins in at this point. I think they had the violins um, always from the beginning, if I am correct, but it really didn't start being a big part until their second album. I'm gonna bring this back like that. So, what I love about this album, I love the Dave McKean art. I was a huge Dave McKean art fan in the 90s, big Sandman fan. Uh, my favorite songs on this album is Return of the Beautiful, which has a spoken word thing where I think he says, "For those of you who die lying down by the river." I can't remember exactly what he says, but it's super awesome. So if you were going to listen to one song on this album to get an idea, Return of the Beautiful would be that. I'm going to just go through each album and kind of say what my favorite track on each album is. Um, Next one we have is Turn Loose the Swans, which really saw them pushing the boundaries of what they were going to do musically in the future. This was where Aaron uh, almost, well, not almost, but at least 50-50, maybe even more so, was doing clean vocals. And I'm not sure how exactly fans reacted from them going to the full-on death metal vocals to the clean vocals, because I didn't become a fan until after this album. Funny thing about this album is I had a bet with my friend Corey um, over who was in Masters of the Universe movie, and I said it was Courtney Cox. He said it was somebody else, and we bet on it, and the loser had to buy the winner a CD, and I told him this is exactly what CD I wanted. So I kind of like that fact that I didn't even have to pay for it and is in my collection so many years later. I think that was around 96 or 97 or something like that. That was when I was buying CDs at a lot slower pace. Probably my favorite song on this is Crown of Sympathy, but Your River is also fantastic. I just love how Crown of Sympathy starts out with the kind of a cappella vocals at the beginning. Uh, this album, to some, is their best album. Um, I'm not sure which album I think is their best albums. I have a few that I think are fantastic. So as they were doing those albums, they also were doing a trio of EPs that had come out sporadically between their full length releases. They put it all together and called it Trinity. This is the, I believe, American version. There was another one where it had these three covers. Kind of, this would have been a strip right here, and right there, and it had parts of the covers. This was when Aaron decided to do his own artwork. I'll talk about that a little later when we get into the big box sets. But these EPs are more in line with their kind of doom death stuff. And I say doom death because it was a lot less clean vocals at this point. And I would say Thrash of the Naked Limbs is probably, well, this one I'm not sure because I can't remember song titles off of this one as well as some of the other albums. I would have to see the lyrics. Yeah, probably that. I'm not 100% sure. Because as I said, the earlier stuff before Turn Loose of Swans, doesn't get listened to quite as much. And granted, I would say Crown of Sympathy, but that's just a remix. This album is really where they grabbed my attention. And this is the 2-disc version that has 4 live songs on it. Cry of Mankind was an immediate pull into the world of My Dying Bride. Just the bleep, bleep, doo, 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 doo. There we go. Just the fact that they had that going throughout the whole song, yet you never got bored, was just fantastic. Like newer stuff, I think some themes are repeated far too often and sometimes stretched out when they shouldn't be. But like everything on this album, this whole album, minus sexuality of bereavement, I mean, that is a song that was on one of the EPs, the EP right before this album. This technically, there is a version where I think it just has 6 songs on it and no disc 2. But, you know, every song on here is fantastic. But I would probably say Cry of Mankind is my favorite. A Sea to Suffer In is fantastic. And this is really, in my opinion, where Martin started really shining as a violin player and keyboard player for this band, because the violin is front and center, but not overpowering. But all the violin parts that I feel that he did were really well thought out and added to the song, whereas violin parts in the future, like within the last few albums, there have been shining moments, but a lot of the times it just kind of seems like filler, or like a second thought was made, and so. But yeah, you cannot go wrong with this album. I think this probably would be my Desert Island My Dying Bride album if I had to choose one. Now this, look at this thing. This is just hacked to hell. I have had this since the day it came out in, what was that? 1996. And even the booklet is creased. I remember listening to this, reading along with the lyrics. I like how these lyrics were kind of weirdly placed, and no pictures of the band really to speak of, except for these silhouettes. Martin was still in the band at this point. Um, this is produced by Megs, Calvin, and Andy. And so that's what the cover looks like. Sorry about my phone keeping on going in and out. Trying to focus. I mean, look at all this wear. I should probably replace this and get a newer version, but it still works perfectly fine. And this would probably be my second. Well, this would be in the top 5 My Dying Bride albums. So let's look at this list. I would probably say either Dark Caress or the title track, like Gods of the Sun, would probably be my favorite too. I had a thing on my ceiling where I wrote out the "No finer woman had ever laid before him, dark and filled with beauty." The whole spoken word thing from that song. All Swept Away is also awesome. And I remember us being really, really impressed with For My Fallen Angel. And Evinta was, I think, originally going to be more stuff like that, like For My Fallen Angel and Sear Me, 1993, the second version of Sear Me, where it was just violin and vocals. And I wonder how much better Evinta would have been. Evinta is one that comes much later, and it's like orchestra versions of My Dying Bride songs, reworked, new lyrics, I believe, in some parts, which I was not thrilled with at first, but I have since come around to it. I do like the fact that this goes in here and it has this kind of window where you see the butterfly. That's pretty cool. So this was also the last album to feature their original drummer, Rick, and the last album to feature Martin on violin and keyboards. After that, they did probably the most panned My Dying Bride album, 34.788% complete, which apparently meant something like humanity has used 34.788% of their time here, and or something like that. I don't know. You're gonna look it up. I can't remember. It's been a while since I read the book. Um, you know, I didn't mind this album. I think it has some pretty cool tracks like the whore, the cook, and the mother. Um, Heroin Chic was the one that everybody kind of criticized them for, but I don't know. I thought it was cool that they were taking chances and have kind of an electronic feel. I know the guitarist Andy really disliked the drummer at the time, and their drummer was from a band called Dominion, I think it was. It was another metal band that had a female singer, I believe. Um, I thought he was a pretty good drummer, but you have to get along with the people that you're in the band with. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. But um, yeah, so I think the first song is probably the best song on here. But Heroin Chic, it's not as bad as everybody kind of criticized it to be, and but it's a very weird My Dying Bride album. Around that same time, there was released this. This might have came out a little bit before that. I am not sure. They both came out in '98, which was a very odd time in my life too. So, um, but this was all the Peaceville artists at the time, and you had two songs by My Dying Bride. These are all cover songs. So they did Some Velvet Morning. I'm not 100% sure who did that originally, but they did Roads, which was a Portishead cover. Um, few songs by Anathema. Remember Blood Divine, which was the singer, the original singer of Anathema, with the like half of um, Cradle of Filth, and I believe Lid is a Lid the band with, I think that's the band with Danny from Anathema and the singer from Trouble. Oh, and there's Dominion. Yeah. So, all right. So then people criticized them a lot for the previous album. So instead of sticking with taking chances, I guess, I don't think it was sticking with taking chances. I think they tried to do something different. Um, wasn't as successful as they thought it might be, and Calvin left after 34% complete, and Andrew or Andy ended up being the sole guitarist. And if you can hear a cat meowing, that's my cat. Um, and honestly, I thought this album was fantastic. She is the Dark is a great song to kick it off. Light at the End of the World, 10 minutes, yet I don't get bored by it. It's just, there's still that fire in them that is awesome. And then right after Light at the End of the World, you get the Fever Sea, which goes from a brooding, melancholy song to just angry, just intense and fairly fast, kind of death metal, doom metal, and I would have to say the Fever Sea is probably my favorite. The funny thing with Light at the End of the World, it has like four times uh, as many lyrics in the booklet than are actually used. And let's see here. So you can see how all the lyrics are like that. You can kind of even read them. Here's all the lyrics for Light at the End of the World. And they Let me see what they did. I thought they made little indications or indents where actual lyrics for the song were. I mean, this is the whole story that goes on, but he only uses part of the lyrics, which I think was kind of cool. Into the Ghost Lake is so great too. So this also um, is the first album with Sean Steels, who was in Anathema for the Alternate Four album, and I think that album is fantastic. I would have to say it's probably my favorite Anathema album. He was just such a great drummer, very creative, awesome, um, and you know, he's in that new band with Hamish, I think his name is Hamish Glencross. I heard it. I checked it out. I didn't really care for the vocals all that much, but I don't know. Maybe I'll have to go back and check it out again. So we had Aaron, Andrew, Aid, and Sean. Originally, Aid was a guitarist, and he wanted to be in the band, but they didn't have a bass player, so he switched to bass. Sometimes I wish they would just have an actual bass player who was a bass player rather than guitarists that became bass players, because there is a huge difference. And I think that could, in the future make things more interesting. I, I'm not criticizing their current bass player or their previous bass player, um, because they do a fine job for what I think um, fits the music. And I don't know if Aaron or Andy would allow them to do um, or be open to having more interesting or melodic bass parts. Uh, I just, I get kind of tired of a bass part that just follows the root note. And I think there's so much more you can do, especially in a band like this where there's a lot of room to move around with a bass line. This is kind of where I fell off with My Dying Bride for a bit. I remember buying this the day it came out, and I might not have been in the mood for My Dying Bride at the time. But I remember not listening to this so much. Uh, I think the title track is really good. I didn't see a point for doing Return of the Beautiful again. The original version, I think, sounds great. Um, the Raven and what is that called? The Raven and the Rose. That's another one that is pretty good. At this point, some of the albums, or My Dying Bride, to me, ended up having a bit more, not filler, but I wasn't as enamored with them at this time. And when did this come out? 2001? Yeah, so I was listening to a lot of other different stuff at the time. Probably not in the most metal of moods, but this one has grown on me. And let's see, who is in the band at this time? I'll put that back up there so you know what I'm talking about. I really didn't like the artwork all that much, especially the interiors. I just thought were kind of eh. Yeah, so this is the first album with Hamish on second guitar. And I just wonder how much he actually wrote, uh, because this group of albums that he was on do have some different and I don't know if I would say new ideas, but um, it just seemed like the songwriting was a little more solid, even though I wasn't in, this isn't one of my most listened to My Dying Bride albums. Um, then they did this live album. I only have this weird promo version of it. I wish I had the actual version. The Voice of the Wretched, which I wasn't too thrilled with, because I think at this time I was listening to a lot of Tom Waits and Tiger Lilies and stuff like that. So um, I don't think I picked this up. Well, I got the promo, but I don't think I listened to it a ton when I first got it. I know there's a screw up with what song is what on here, but they do a pretty decent job live. And, it's got Sean on drums, and I think he was a great drummer overall. Um, I'll talk about a later live thing, and they've had a one drummer that I wasn't too thrilled with. He did good stuff, but you know, I'm picky sometimes. So this album, I don't even think I got it when it came out. Where the heck is my booklet? There it is. I remember picking it up used, and I don't think I listened to this album really until 2007, maybe 2006. But like The Wreckage of My Flesh is fantastic. Um, Catherine Blake is probably the best song on here. This album, even though I came to it really late, got me excited about My Dying Bride again. And the song, The Prize of Beauty, there's a line or the section where he sings, "She waits for me in my dreams." That part is so awesome. And then this, I believe, was the first one with Sarah on keyboards. And, you know, I thought she was a perfect fit. She fit the moody uh, things that were, gone on 34% complete. Um, they did have keyboards on and orchestration on Light at the End of the World, but I thought that she ended up just kind of fitting right in the notch where she should have been with the keys. And I was pretty sad to see her go, because for a while there they had just kind of well, they had one girl who played violin too, and that was kind of a disaster. Um, then we have what I think is the finest later album by My Dying Bride, The Line of Deathless Kings. To Remain Tombless, what a great opener. This also has one of the first times that I can remember that Aaron did vocal harmonies around the end of the song, and I wish he would do more of that. He's been doubling stuff on the new album, which is pretty awesome, like for the first song, but he does it a lot throughout the um, album, the new album. But this album, I think, out of the songs on here, I think this doesn't uh, start doesn't lose its steam until like one of these last two. Um, I was never a fan of Deeper Down. I don't know why they released that as a single, uh, especially seeing when Love's Intolerable Pain is such an awesome uh, song. Same with like what is that? L'amour Detroit. Detroit. I can't even read this. Can't read that. That's crazy. I cannot be loved. Just this album came at the perfect time in my life too. Um, Going through some crazy relationship stuff, and I love this artwork. And this is the one and only album that had their drummer John. I can't remember his last name, but he was from another kind of British doom band that sounded very much like My Dying Bride. And honestly, he should have just joined them. I know Andrew got along with him really well, but after he left, um, what was his name? John Bennett. Um, After he left, they did an album called An Ode to Woe, and this comes with the DVD of the show and the CD. Um, let's see what this guy's name is. Dan Mullins. You know, Dan isn't too bad. And again, Lena Abe is a good fit for them. I just wish she did more. I wish they would, let her stretch a little. These two, I believe, were a couple, and I think she left because I think she had a kid, and he left shortly after that, or a couple albums after that. I like this artwork. I think it's pretty cool. I'm not sure who did it. The recording quality on this is fantastic, and the performances are pretty good. I just am not a big fan of Dan Mullins on drums. I don't know why. I don't know what it is about him that I didn't dig, but I was very happy when they announced that Sean Steele was coming back, but he constantly has issues with his ankle, I believe. And I'm just going to put this up. So, For Lies I Sire came out in what year? 2009. And this was the reappearance of violin. So Sarah left after. Here, I'll just go like that. Sarah left after the live album. I do like the artwork for this. I think it's pretty cool, and the interior stuff has stuff like this, kind of weird. But it's pretty cool. And let me find the lineup here. So, on Ode to Woe, which is the live one, Lena had taken over because after Line of Deathless Kings, Adrian went to the United States to be with some girl who I guess was batshit insane or crazy or whatever, and he regrets leaving, or at least that's what it seems like. He regrets leaving. But by the time he came back, they had Lena in the band, and I know Aaron said that just because he wanted to come back, they would not get rid of her. I have a feeling that these two might be somewhat difficult to work with, or they're very protective. That's probably more it, rather than being difficult to work with. They're very protective of My Dying Bride. I know Katie Stone played violin and keyboards on this album, and she's decent at both things, but nothing really stood out. I liked it better the more I listened to it, but initial reaction was kind of eh. And Dan Mullen's first album that he did with them in the studio, um, My Body a Funeral, is fantastic though. The funny thing is, most My Dying Bride albums, the very first song on each album is probably my favorite, or at least a majority of them. Um, yeah, this album isn't one of my most listened to, um, but I have listened to it quite a bit leading up to the release of the newest album. Uh, the thing is, while I was listening to it, I was working, so song titles kind of go in and out of my head pretty quick these days. So, Katie Stone in the band, out of the band. So by the time 2012 comes around, they have a guy named Sean McGowan on violin and keyboards. And on this album, Sean Taylor Steele. Actually, they call him Sean Dubia Taylor Steele on this. He returned to the band as a studio drummer, not full time, I don't think. And this one, I don't remember ever looking at the song titles as I'm listening to them, but I think The Poorest Waltz was one of the highlights. This one, again, I've listened to probably about 6 times since it's been released. I remember the last time I listened to it, I was more impressed with Sean's violin playing on this one. The production is fantastic, as always, on this. And the mix is fantastic, which is something I cannot say for one of the newer EPs and the newest album. We will just kind of... I don't understand why they do these goofy slip cases. I mean, what's the point? What is the point? We have The Vaulted Shadows. The reason I picked this up, even though I had, well, we'll do this. The Vaulted Shadows and Manuscript, because these 2 EPs were kind of back to back, and Sean is on this one, and I believe he is on this one. Let me double check for y'all, which is how I say you all today, because I have a coworker who says y'all. At this point, he's Sean Winter Taylor Steele's on drums, and he was part of the band for the Bargest o' Whitby. I'd already had this. I missed the Bargest of Whitby, and it was kind of expensive to get. And then they put both EPs together. I believe this is a 20-minute song. I'm not 100% sure how long it is, but it goes on for quite a while, and it's cool as kind of like background music, like if you needed something kind of brooding in the background, but not one of their best. I think they could have done a little bit better on that. But the Manuscript has, well, the title track I think is fantastic, and Only Tears to Replace Her With, I think, is an awesome, just really melancholy song. But yeah, So 2 EPs that they released, and then they came out with this. Everybody was super stoked because what's his name? Calvin was back in the band. Let me pull this booklet out. Calvin was back in the band, yet he joined the band after they wrote all the music. So he did record guitars, I believe. Let me double check. I'm pretty sure he recorded guitars on the album, but he did none of the writing. And I was really excited to hear what he would be bringing to My Dying Bride. He did shows with them after this, and um, unfortunately, by the time they started writing the newest album, he had left the band, so it was down to Andrew again. And the best song on this album is "And My Father Left Forever." Awesome song. Unfortunately, just a few minutes too long. It could have been whittled down quite a bit. Um, and I remember being super disappointed with this album when I got it, and the longer I had it, the more I liked it. But overall, I was disappointed in it when it did come out, but it has grown on me. And I really wish I would have grabbed some water because my voice is really getting kind of hoarse and whatever here. Um, which brings us to their newest album, The Ghost of Orion. Um, you know, I have criticized this since last Friday, and my thoughts have not changed too much. Your Broken Shore is a fantastic song. I don't even think it goes on too long. I think it's pretty damn good all the way through. Um, but the rest of the album, just kind of it. Well, it's kind of boring, but I listened to it today before I left, um, and some stuff has started resonating with me a little more. The one thing, well, there's a few things. So I think the mix is pretty bad. When they get a lot of layers on things, uh, stuff gets lost. I think the vocals are a little bit too low in the mix at times. Um, the drums actually sound kind of like they were recorded after everything else, and he came in and just did it to those things and a click track. And I know I've had other people disagree with me, saying everybody uses click tracks these days. And I wonder how many people do use click tracks. And if so, that might also be why I think a lot of metal seems so sterile and stuff. The mix is just kind of poor on this. Um, the vocals on Your Broken Shore are fantastic. I was hoping that he would use that um, double um, lead vocal, doubling things in unison more. But after a while, he does it like almost on everything, which is unfortunate because it gets kind of monotonous after a while. The bass lines just aren't exciting. They serve their purpose, but they don't really bring anything more. Um, and the violin and what keyboards I can hear um, are just kind of buried in the mix, except for on Your Broken Shore. It's like they mixed Broken Shore pretty much perfectly, had cello on that song, and do a really good job of that, and then it's kind of like everything else kind of falls to pieces. There's one song on here, I can't remember which one it is, where it's just guitars and a female singer. It, it's cool, kind of. I don't like the vocals on it. I guess I was hoping for more. Um, I know they've went through a lot of personal stuff, but that's, I guess not an excuse to write boring songs, because Aaron was the one, who was most affected, and Andrew wrote everything. And unlike Light at the End of the World, this one doesn't grab my attention. I think it might grow on me given time, and I put it down for a day and didn't listen to it again, and then I listened to it again today, and I guess I enjoyed it a little more, but not a ton. And before I move on to the two last things, I will mention this band, which Aaron did guest vocals on. This was Disincarnate. And you're probably saying, "Oh, that cheap guy, he bought it used." No, I had a brand new version. I bought this new, and unfortunately, I think the very last track, which is a demo, got scratched. And when I found this used, I just rebought it and gave the other version to my nephew, who I do most of the music with. And so, Monarch of the Sleeping Marches, Aaron does guest trade-off vocals. And this was the band James Murphy did in, what year was that? 1993. And they only did this one album. But Aaron is on Monarch of Sleeping Marches, so that is why I'm mentioning it. And I love the fact that he is wearing a My Dying Bride t-shirt. So, the last two things I have to show you. Whoops. I guess we will see what this looks like. Oh, I have to maneuver my camera here, but I want to put my CD away. Let me pull this camera out just a smidge. So this is Evinta, and I don't know why it says Evinta 1. I don't know if you can see that, but it says Evinta 1 right there. Originally, this was released as a 2-disc set. This is the 3-disc set that I believe came out the same year, but I never picked it up because I was very disappointed with this, because I was hoping for more stuff like Sear Me and For You, but we didn't get that. When I found out Ghost of Orion was coming out, and when I found out about this box set, well, I guess you can call them book sets, I decided to get this because I wanted to, have a complete My Dying Bride discography, as it were. Let me see if I can pull this out just a little bit more. All right. And this is part of the reason why I wanted to do the video like this, because otherwise I can't open the book and show you this stuff like this. I think it's kind of cool. Old pictures. You get all the song titles right here. It was a project almost 15 years in the making, an idea that sat smoldering and never really had a reason to burn alive until now. 3 CDs worth of darkness and melancholy, recreated anew to mark 20 years of My Dying Bride. All new music arranged to soundscapes of sorrow, past, and hopeless futures. Finally, the 20th anniversary allows us to release this music in a form it has been desperately, woefully waiting for. Enjoy the darkness. So, when you listen to this, All of them have different song titles, but some of the lyrics are the same. And this book goes through and shows historical pictures and whatnot. And it's weird. So they show As the Flower Withers, which you can see at the breast, and the EP. Turn Loose the Swans, and all the EPs or singles that they put out at that time. Extra artwork and shit. So it talks about each album, but the weird thing is, so they get to like Gods of the Sun, and then they get to 47% complete, and down here with the kind of these masterwork best ofs, you see Light at the End of the World. And it's like it doesn't even get its own page and its own blurb. It's just bizarre to me because they just move right on to Dreadful Hours. Let me see if I can get this, which I don't understand. Sorry, you're going to get a lot of where it is trying to focus on what I'm showing you. Unfortunately, I'm going through this fast. There's probably, if you had Sean Steele's in there right there, that's probably the best lineup that they ever had. Well, no. The best later lineup that they had. Because Hamish was fantastic, you know. And Lena actually does probably more interesting bass player parts than Aid did. This guy's hair will never go away, and I'm jealous because I used to have super long hair, not as long as his, probably down to about right there, but now I'm bald. So, oh well. Speaking of bald, Aaron, you know, that's a guy that actually rocks the shaved head thing better than actually having hair, which is, you know, it's a good goal in life to rock that shaven head. So this is where they have all the lyrics, and then I will show you the box set that kind of set this in motion. This is A Harvest of Dread. This is actually a limited edition 5 CD hardback. It's got, I'll just read this for you, 92 pages on the rise and reign of the celebrated UK Doom legends. Contains 5 discs of rarity, early works, freshly unearthed and never previously heard, pre-production demos, band track favorites, and live audio. So disc 1 and 2 were, I guess, curated by Aaron and Andrew. I think Aaron is disc 1 and Andrew is disc 2. And then it gives, let's see here. I did another video that goes through this whole book, but you know, it can't hurt to go through it again. Thomas Gabriel Warrior does a foreword. That guy is the most pretentious guy in metal. It shows all of their EPs, album covers, DVDs, whatnot. So I'm only missing a couple things, but not anything that hasn't kind of been collected already. It lists all the current members, all the past members. See, Calvin actually left again after 4 years, from 2014 to 2018. I wish I had made an album with him writing, but they did not. A lot of personal stuff was happening. This is a great read if you have not read it before. It just has some great insights as to things happening and why things happened and why people were coming and going in the band. And I'll go a little faster here. So lots and lots of text, which I thought was great, because sometimes you get these books and it's like the previous one I showed you, where it's just a little bit of text and it's kind of, you're like, well, this could have been put into a far cheaper, easier to manage packaging, but I think these are great together. So this is technically the best lineup, in my opinion, of My Dying Bride, but the later lineup with Sean Steele's. So basically, let's see, Light of Darkness, or whatever the heck that album's called. What is it called? Songs of Darkness, Words of Light. As I said, I didn't get that until like 3 years after it came out, so apparently I wasn't in a metal mood. There was one point in my life where I didn't listen to metal for, oh God, I think it was 2, maybe 3 years or something like that. I was just tired of metal at the time. I just wanted more or different stuff. So lots and lots of text. This is probably boring for some, but I just figured if I'm going through their whole discography, I might as well go through this all again. This guy, Bill, he is the drummer that Andrew did not get along with. And they talk quite a bit about 34% Complete, and it was weird because I didn't realize they had a second guitarist when I got back into them. I didn't know that they had gotten a second guitarist, and the more I listened to him, the more I liked Hamish as a guitarist. It's too bad he is not in the band anymore. Oh, woe is me. So this is almost done. Hey, didn't we see that picture before? Aaron with hair. Pretty soon he's going to be Aaron with no hair. Bloop, bloop. Oh, that's a great cut. Look at that. It's pretty funny. And Calvin with this huge beard. That's pretty awesome. So, that is pretty much it for the My Dying Bride stuff. Hopefully you like this. And, so Andrew does track or disc one, and Aaron does disc 2. And then let's look to see what we got here. So